to today's agenda. So our first session is going to be chaired by my colleague, Alex Connock, who's a fellow in management practice with us in the marketing group. And it's going to be all about responsible use of AI. So I'll turn it now over to Alex to introduce the session and his panelists. Alex, all yours.
Thanks so much, Andrew. If we could switch my video on, that'd be great, please. Start my video. Thank you so much. Yes, so the responsible and irresponsible uses of AI in marketing. So there's a story in the Financial Times today, actually, by Gillian Tett about Barclays and Amazon launching a fintech AI project in Germany, and it raises some of the ethical issues we're going to be talking about today. And actually, you find that story in one guise or another pretty much every day in the papers at the moment. And this is an incredibly topical subject that we're going to talk about. And we have four brilliant people to help us with that. We have Sarah Bird joining from Microsoft. We have Perry Nightingale from WPP, Dr. Natalia Efremova from our own Saïd Business School, and Dr. Yasmeen Ahmad from Teradata in California, who's got up especially early for us, so we're very grateful to her. What we're going to do is we're going to hear from each person for maybe 5 minutes, and they're going to show us some interesting examples or some academic research, and then we'll all chip in during that, and then hopefully reach a couple of conclusions for about 25 minutes. So let's start off with Sarah Bird from Microsoft. Sarah, would you like to talk us through some of the really interesting things that I know that Microsoft have been doing in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the areas that I work in, so I work in responsible AI in general. I lead that for our cognitive services, which are a lot of our core AI models at Microsoft, which people can use both sort of directly as a service, but it also powers a lot of our products inside of Microsoft. And one of the ones that I think is generally just an amazing sort of lesson and experience in how we think about responsible use is a product we have that's been in preview for a little while called Custom Neural Voice. And I think if we go to the next slide, I can show you kind of what Custom Neural Voice is, and then we can talk about why responsible use is so important when we think about this technology. So what Custom Neural Voice is doing is allowing us to make a fairly, highly realistic synthetic voice of a person. And so I think if we can play the first audio clip here, we can hear, I believe this one is it might be the robot voice, and the next one human, or the other way around. So let's look at those two.
And here it comes.
I live at 9th Avenue and 20th Street, 3 blocks away from where I work.
Yeah, so I think we can see that one is, clearly not human there. And then,
Sarah, what does concatenative mean?
This is the older technology that we were using, and it's just created by concatenating a bunch of the different sounds together. Where neural voices, we're using a different technology to actually train them. So let's go to the next one.
Avenue and 20th Street, 3 blocks away from where I work.
So that's the person. And then if we go to the last one, you can see what we can do now with a neural voice to sound like that person.
I live at 9th Avenue and 20th Street, 3 blocks away from where I work.
And so the thing about this is it's not obviously 100% perfect, but what's so amazing about this technology is it used to take many hours of voice to even be able to train something close to this realistic. And we have better technology now where you can actually take a small amount of voice comparatively and make this voice. And so suddenly this is a technology that's actually practical and accessible.
But what sort of training time would you need on that? I mean, on this side, you have 500 sentences.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not, it's not that long. I think it's sort of in the zone of hours-ish, right? Like if you were wanting to use one of these voices, you would have a voice actor and you would actually, be specifically getting that training data. But we're pushing this lower and lower all the time. And so I think we're getting to the point where we can get pretty good voices with, even 30 minutes, an hour of sound. So it's definitely something. So if you want to play maybe the cricket one, because I know we were talking about that before.
It's recorded.
J. Bumrah to M. Stoinis, no run, swing and a miss. Stoinis swings at the off-cutter from Bumrah, but fails to get any connection with the bat.
And here's synthesized.
It's brought to Masood, edged, Good ball by Broad outside off. Mustard has a go at it and ends up edging it to the second slip, where the ball just falls short of root.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say from a creative industry point of view, this is a hugely useful technology to be able to go back and change what an actor or an actress has said in a film that we've made, or to have a voice available for a brand sponsor this is a multi-million-dollar opportunity for that side of the business for sure.
So Sarah, how do you get the expression, the emotion into the synthesized voice?
That's exactly, that's actually one of the things that we're even going farther in, where we're working now on the ability where you can actually coach the voice and say, oh, that phrase, don't say it like this, say it like this, right? And make sure that you're capturing that part of the voice as well. So we're really pushing how much you can make it sound like you, but also maybe not sound like your voice, but express things the way you're expressing it. So trying to really make this a useful technology for everyone. It's all in the machine learning, how we're doing it. So.
And what sort of uses are you envisaging for this technology?
Yeah, so I think what I was going to say is exactly, if you're, depending on where you land and how you're thinking about this, you're either like, wow, this is amazing, right? And I need it now, or oh my God, no, this is the future I don't want, right? And so I think the rest of the story here is that we think there's, and there are people, this has been in preview for a little while at Microsoft, so we have a bunch of large customers using this in pretty interesting applications, but this is exactly a case where we need to think about making sure that this technology is used responsibly. And so when the team created it, the idea was exactly for these creative industries, where you could create a voice of your company, right? And have this fictional persona that is the brand and the sound of your company. And by having a synthetic voice, you could use it a lot more places, right? And so that's one of the cases. Or we've seen really interesting cases where people are using this in education, right? And to make more magical experiences as far as storytelling and creating applications that make content more engaging. And we've also are looking at using it and working on a pilot to use it as a technology to capture people with ALS, capture their voices so they can have a synthetic voice that they can use in the future. So that's a pilot that we're doing right now.
Yeah, we have a really good point in the chat from Sunila Lobo, who says, who's going to own the IP on this? Is it going to be the original actor, or is it going to be whoever the actor was acting for, whose voice might be used in text that they never read out in the first place?
Yes, and you missed a third party in that. All of the AI IP is Microsoft's, right? So is it the person that created the training data, the person that brings the training data, or the person that creates the model, right? And I think that who owns as far as the voice is whatever's in the contract between the voice talent and the company, right? Microsoft doesn't get involved in that. But part of what we have done and what we can talk about in terms of responsible use here is exactly making sure that we have clear information for voice talent about what this technology does and understand what it means to be participating in it. And we require that our customers give that information to the voice talent, and they're disclosing how the technology works and what it means to make a voice. And so trying to make sure that voice talent have the information they need to have a contract that's appropriate for them. And so that's exactly, kind of one of the things about these emerging technologies where we have to really figure these things out. So you have Microsoft's, yeah, go ahead.
Just moving to your next slide, perhaps we should move on after that, but to the neural TTS assessment slide, the next one you have. Just talk us through a little bit about what this, because this is a kind of risk assessment, isn't it, that you do?
Yeah, exactly. So in responsible AI in general, at Microsoft, one of the key tools we need to do with any technology is we need to do what we call an impact assessment, which is understand what is the potential for this technology, both positive and negative for different stakeholders, right? This has a different effect on voice talent than on the company, than on Microsoft, than on society, right? If it were used for deepfakes, right, that would have an effect on society. So society in general is a stakeholder for this. And so we do an impact assessment. Here's, we have an exercise, which is public on our website, called harms modeling, that is what this chart is from, that helps us fill out that impact assessment. So we can understand the potential harm for different stakeholders and make sure that we build solutions in to mitigate that in the technology. And so I think the next slide we have here is exactly different elements. And so if any of you in the audience are still panicking about, all the deepfakes that could be running around, this technology is limited access. So we review every use case of it and make sure that the customers understand the technology and what it's allowed to be used for and what it shouldn't be used for. As I already mentioned, there's a code of conduct that they're required to follow. That includes, as we said, the disclosure to voice talents and having information there. And so that's one of the features we're building here. And now we've gone even farther to build technical controls so that we can protect voice talents even more and make sure that they are actually consenting, and we have proof that they are consenting. And so we have new features coming out with that as we're evolving this technology in preview. And so this is kind of a story where there's so many exciting, magical use cases you can imagine, but you can also imagine if we're not careful about how it's used and how we design it, that this could definitely have significant potential for negative consequences.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for that introduction to voice synthesis. So let's just use the chat. So if anyone could just chip into the chat, voice synthesis, fantastically useful or fantastically scary, just put it in the chat. And whilst we just top them up, perhaps we'd like to hand over to Perry, who's going to give us a similar presentation in a way, but this time about visual creation, I guess. Perry, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just having shot a lot of film and used a lot of voice talent in the past, the ability to recover your voice if someone coughed or a plane flew over and you said this brilliant line and it got ruined by something, which happens every single time on a shoot, right? So there's positives even for the voice actors themselves in this, I think, to be honest. And we tend to find as a society a sort of relatively happy medium along the way. So I'm hopeful for that technology. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the more visual side. So this is synthesizing people. The most expensive part of producing ads after the creative production is the people who appear in them. And I was doing some experiments. This is just an example of bias in AI. I was doing some experiments to see if the age of people in adverts affected conversion. And what you're looking at here is one fake person at 2 different ages. So I've created an avatar, deepfake person at 2 different ages to test what people are more likely to click on. And what I found in this research, interestingly, was that for the men, it worked perfectly. I could create 2 different ages of men absolutely flawlessly, right? You would not be able to tell these people weren't real. And we're doing quite a bit of work with Oxford in the new year to understand how people feel about this. Do they feel tricked? Do they feel manipulated? But for the men, I could create these ages perfectly, they're absolutely fine. But when I aged the women, I found that many of them would begin to take on more masculine features, right? And in this one in particular, on the right-hand side, the earring is gone. They look much more male as I aged them, right? And we couldn't understand how it happened. We went back to the data set. And in the data set, we saw double the number of young women. So between the ages of 20 and 29, there were double the number of female faces in the data set. And correspondingly, half the number of older women in the data set. And so the AI had effectively taught itself that age was a male thing. And FFHQ is not a little data set we use in WPP. This is the de facto data set for AI facial research in the world. And so we went back to NVIDIA and, and to Microsoft and our partners and, to talk about getting this fixed. But I just thought, it's just very interesting to see visually how AI has taught itself here, a sort of a human thing, right? And the danger of companies like WPP inadvertently amplifying this, right? Because, if I had found that, age and conversion were correlated and I had unleashed this on a media plan, and we have plenty of checks to make sure that that wouldn't have happened. But hypothetically, if that had happened, it would have quietly erased older women from the media portfolio, fairly rapidly based on the sort of size of these things, right? So
Perry, Archie has said in the chat, it's a reminder that even the data sets that we're using to create AI bases need regulation. In fact, Natalia's going to talk a little bit like that shortly, I think. So it's a fascinating point.
Yeah, and I just think you've got to remember when the enormous scale you get from AI comes at the at the risk of you scaling the bad as well as the good, right? You're scaling a tiny number of samples relative to the overall picture. So that's an example of irresponsible AI.
Just to be clear, Perry, those aren't real people.
These are all fake people. Yeah, these are all. Yeah, no, they never existed. Yeah.
Sarah, just while I've got it, Sarah, it's a good question from Alex here. How long before you can synthesize a voice in speaking a language that the individual couldn't speak to start with?
Yeah, I was actually trying to look this up. So in addition to custom voices, you can use Microsoft's voices we've already trained. So we have maybe like 120 different voices that you can use available in quite a few different languages. So I was going to look that up and drop the link in. So I think we have quite a few different options already.
Thank you. Okay, Perry, over to you, but for the assisted creativity, which is also fascinating.
Yeah. Again, the automated localization voice is hugely useful to us. So just responsible. I mean, I want to end this little section on a high note. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is using AI to speed up creativity. We know we have to make tens of thousands of pieces of content for each product launch with all of the different channels and medias and stuff like that. So this was some research from Microsoft where we trained an AI on about 20,000 images of scarlet macaws in the wild. And we, trained it so that you could paint them very rapidly, create these little sketches on the left, and the AI would create the parrot on the right. So it's going to show you just very quickly in a couple of seconds how that works. It took about 36 hours for it to learn how to paint a parrot, and then it takes about 4 seconds for it to create an advert, roughly. This to us is the Photoshop and Microsoft Word of the 21st century. So our artists will work this way, frankly. They will drag and drop stuff on there. Again, there's a sort of question about what does it mean to be a junior artist in the 21st century, and we have to be really careful that we don't bottom out our industry by letting AI do a lot of this stuff, so that we're thinking hard about that. But I did want to just draw the attention to this use case of it. So Microsoft have a global hackathon that they do each year where everyone in Microsoft comes together to do a hackathon. I'm not sure if Sarah might have done one in the past, but it's a global thing. And they let a handful of clients join them in that process, right? And they let us join it. And we did a little project which was about using that technology for kids with disabilities. So we took the adaptive controller that they made at Xbox to control very basic shapes, that basically like the same way the parrots was done. And these kids could select an artist from history to finish off the painting for them, basically. And we kind of ended our little hackathon project video with just this image, really, of a Monet on the fridge where, perhaps the brothers and sisters had full motor skills or whatever. And we have creativity for all as this sort of idea, I think, behind how we look at assisted creativity. So yes, it's about helping us get 55 different versions of banner ads out the door in the afternoon, but it's also about giving everyone the power to be creative, right? And that I think is a real opportunity with AI in the next 5-10 years. So.
Thank you so much, Perry. So we've had 2 really excellent, interesting use cases there, both of them with a myriad marketing applications. What we can do now is going to hear from Natalia, my colleague, on a little bit more of the theory around AI. And then we're going to come back to Yasmeen at the end for some thoughts on the ethics, if you like, and into some of the pertinent ethical questions that can be asked. So Natalia, over to you for something on the sort of intellectual backdrop.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you, Perry and Sarah, for amazing presentations. So the problem with these models is that in order to make them work correctly, what we need to do is to understand what is they're doing when we're training them. For example, when Perry was speaking about his data set with large number of younger women, the output will look different. And when we will first look at this kind of output, we want to understand what's wrong with the model and to be able to grasp it really quickly and to eliminate this kind of problem early in the development stage. We need to look at the transparency and interpretability of the algorithm. And when we speak about transparency, what we mean is how the algorithm itself works. What is the structure algorithm of the algorithm and what does it do? And
So what we're essentially saying, Natalia, is that there are two types of algorithms. The algorithms that we know what they're doing, which are the transparent ones, and then there are those that we really don't quite know what they're doing, and they're the black box ones, aren't they?
So both types of algorithms can be both transparent and non-transparent, depending how we design them. And there are certain different level of transparency in different types of algorithms, from very easy and clear ones, when you look at the parameters and you do understand what they mean exactly, or when you look at like millions of parameters and we have no clue what they're doing. And this has to do with how to interpret them. And interpretability is looking at the algorithm as a whole, including the data. So the case that Perry mentioned with imbalanced data set has to do more with the data. So the problem is in the data, not in the algorithm. So we need to take whole system in account to understand how it works and to make it work correctly. So can you please switch to the next slide? So when
do you want the next slide, Natalia, the one with the cats and the dogs? This one, yeah.
So the models which are not transparent and we cannot directly interpret the parameters of the model actually can be interpreted in a way. For this, we use different programs or special parts of the code that will show what is happening inside the algorithm. For example, this is a case when we need to understand what the model was thinking when it was classifying an image onto the cats or dogs. It can do both in this case, right? You can see a dog and a cat. And the system just basically shows what pieces of the image it looks at when it is interpreting the outcome. So a little head map shows the attention of the model when it looks at the picture. So the results of the algorithm will be easily interpretable for humans. And when we see wrong type of highlight on the resulting picture, we can say, okay, this is something wrong happening here. So the black box model are not that uninterpretable or untransparent. It is possible, but for different kind of applications, it will be done in multiple ways. For example, this would work for the cases that Perry talked about, but for cases, for example, for speech generation or speech synthesis that Sarah has mentioned, we will need special different kinds of tools to be able to look into these models. And generally, they're very complex, and you will need to access each part of the system separately.
Natalia, I think I'm going to have to jump in because we're almost out of time, and I really want to make sure that we give Yasmeen the chance to give us a little bit of an overview. Yasmeen, from what you've heard, what's your position regarding the ethics of all this, and how we relate the business outcomes to the ethics?
So maybe I'll just, I know we're up against time. I'll summarize to a few key points. We at Teradata, we work with global enterprise companies who've been pushing the envelope on a ton of different use cases in a range of different areas, where those use cases are leveraging AI to get more sophisticated. But as we look at all of the impacts of AI, and we've had some comments in the question window, just because you can do it, should you do it? And we're seeing businesses, enterprises asking that question and being really cognizant of the fact that consumers care, and so do governments, and potentially we're looking at regulation in the future that has tighter controls on AI. To give just a couple of examples, just because you can, should you do it? So today we can do price discrimination. We can look at where somebody's shopping from, their browsing history. We can look at their personal occupation, perhaps even their level of education, their age, their gender, and customize the price on a product. That's price discrimination. We can do that, but is it fair? Is it ethical to be selling the same product to two different people just because of their background, their education? Another example is in the financial services space. Credit cards, loans, insurance products are given to consumers based on a credit risk or a score. And we're seeing customers, again, pushing the envelope, bringing in more and more data to get more accurate risk scores. So that data is now not just your past purchasing history, but it's actually demographics about the individual. It's their gender to give them car insurance. It's their zip code. So yes, we can do that, but is it ethical to be using gender to make insurance premium decisions? So there's a number of cases and examples where now with the uses of AI, especially I see in business and industry, they're actually coming up against the question of, yes, we can do it. And actually we have access to more detailed data. We're collecting more detailed data about consumers, but is it ethical? Should we do it? What's the regulation? What's the controls? And maybe if I just leave the audience with one thought specific to marketing, as we think through those controls, those measures, it's important that we start to think about how we govern AI within organizations. And we're seeing more and more businesses thinking about governance. How do you begin to govern AI, especially in a world where now enterprises have moved away from IT having all the control? It's much more proliferated to business units. Business units are off doing all sorts of experimentation, which is great. But how do companies stop themselves falling into the trap of ending up with public news stories, consumers that are upset of how their data has been used? And I actually came across a great strategic framework for AI in marketing. It was just recently published in the Journal of Academy for Marketing Science. And it starts to think about AI in three different ways: mechanical AI, thinking AI, feeling AI. Mechanical AI is much more about automating repetitive decisions. And in organizations, it's maybe okay that mechanical AI is not as governed. But thinking AI, and especially feeling AI, where actually now you're getting the AI to play the role of processing data, make conclusions, and actually drive those conclusions into two-way interactions with your customers, with your consumers. Those uses of AI, or those use cases of AI, potentially need more governance. They need more oversight. They need more consideration about whether we as businesses feel that thinking and feeling applications of AI are actually ethical, even though we can do them. The technology enables it, the data enables it.
Thank you so much, Yasmeen. It's a brilliant summary, and that was a pretty rapid half-hour guide to an extraordinarily interesting subject that I'm sure we could have all talked about all day. Thank you so much to everyone for the comments. Thank you to Sarah, Perry, Natalia, and Yasmeen. Back to you, Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And thank you, Perry, Sarah, Yasmeen, and Natalia.